Michelle Key, and I'm a senior at Chadwick School with an interest in pursuing marine biology slash science with some kind of climate change minor. And my hope and dream is to become some kind of marine biologist or marine veterinarian. And yeah. Okay, so for the first question,
Awesome.
what do you specialize in marine biology?
So I'm a coral reproduction biologist. So one of my goals is to work under a principal investigator who is also a coral reproduction biologist. Um, and we optimize every portion of assisted sexual reproduction with coral because the main issue in coral and in a lot of our restoration efforts is that because there are so few corals out on the reef when they reproduce, they aren't able to interact with each other. Therefore, their ability to evolve on their own is stunted. So that's where we come in, where we essentially make sure that these different genetic varieties of various coral species are all interacting with each other and still able to reproduce and create new tissue on the reefs. And then we also put a lot of effort into optimizing the fertilization process, post-settlement care, so basically taking care of them through their different life stages, and researching different aspects of the process of reproduction, such as which genotypes work best together, where can we figure out the sex of corals before they are outplanted so we don't produce an all-female or an all-male reef, and we're just trying to optimize pretty much every portion of that area of restoration.
That's really cool. Like I never knew coral struggled with like having that many genetic diversity because I know from school we learned that like you need genetic diversity in order to like evolve because like at some point something happens and the whole coral species could die off because there's not enough variety for it to like live back again.
Yeah, I mean, in any population, regardless of whether or not you're talking about in the ocean or on land, in any ecosystem, a population is considered functionally extinct if it's not able to evolve on its own. And through sexual reproduction, that's one of the main ways that animals evolve. So we're basically just trying to counteract that while we figure out the best ways to go about coral restoration. So yeah, I think it's something a lot of people don't really consider. And it is like a really, really new area of marine science. And I cannot take credit for recognizing that issue because it's actually the PI of my lab, Dr. Hannah Cook. She is an incredible, incredible scientist, an amazing pioneer in recognizing a lot of these issues and using her specified background to really figure out every process that we currently use in our lab. So yeah, it's definitely an area that a lot of people I don't think really consider, but it's super cool and really new.
That's amazing.
Yeah, super cool.
And then like what's your favorite part about being a marine biologist?
Ooh, I've been asked this question like a million times, and I still honestly never know the correct answer. Um, I'd probably say just the fact that everything you do every day isn't completely new. I don't really have like a standardized work day. Like for example, today I thought I was just going to go in and be in the laboratory, and then all of a sudden our field team came in and was just like, "Hey, we have like a 2-hour window that we can get out to the coral nursery. Like, do you want to take it?" And I literally went scuba diving in a t-shirt and like my work shorts and under a wetsuit because I didn't bring a swimsuit. And like it, I don't know, it was weird because it was like no other job would allow you to have experiences like that. And it was kind of crazy because we just go out in the field and then spend half the day in the laboratory, or during spawning season, I'll work through the night and see coral spawn, which is like a once in a lifetime opportunity because it's so hard to predict when they'll go, and let alone be in an area where there's enough corals to observe that in the first place. And the fact that they're endangered and you need a lot of permits in order to observe this process. There's just nothing is predictable and everything keeps you on your toes. And all the people as well are fantastic. Everyone in this field is in it because they care about it and they have a personal reason to be there. And it's really exciting to be in a community like that. So I'd say those are probably my favorite parts of it. I don't think there's any single one answer, but it's always exciting no matter what.
That's amazing. And like that sounds like really fun just to like have randomness thrown at you.
Yeah, you have to be ready like to adapt to everything.
Yeah.
So it's really cool.
I mean, it must be like really nice to have kind of like not really like a set in stone schedule, like just have have like taken the chance whenever you want to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have like deadlines for sure. Any job does, but the way you go about achieving them can change every day, which is definitely really exciting. But there's still like some certain, there's a certain schedule that we do follow because a lot of our work is seasonal. So like coral spawning pretty much only happens, at least with the species that we work with, over the summer, just typically July and August.
Mm-hmm.
So that's almost like a guaranteed time where you know what you're going to be doing, but then there's always like hurricanes during that time and you have to deal with that. And then there's, we have power outages and I have to
Oh
deal with
no.
working on a tank and making sure all that has flow and pumps and there's no electricity or, all this just crazy stuff happening all the time.
And then like what inspired you to go into the marine field?
Ooh. Honestly, growing up, I'm from originally from Ohio, but my grandparents lived in Bradenton, Florida, and we used to go snorkeling a lot at a local beach with my family. And there was like a tiny little patch reef, like right off the shore. And I remember by the time I was like 9, it was completely gone, and I didn't understand what
Oh
coral
no.
disease looked like at the time. So I just thought that maybe like the sand eroded it or something like that. I didn't fully understand it, but then later on in early high school, I met with the Coral Restoration Foundation to go scuba diving and see the coral nursery. And it was the first time someone had actually explained like what threats corals face and why they're so important. And then B, that there's actually a career and something that you can do in order to fix this problem. And it allows you to be really connected with nature. And it's, extremely physical job. It's always engaging. And all the people were just really excited about it. So I think seeing their joy and their love for this field is kind of what pushed me forward into this field in my own career right now. And I also knew that I wanted to do something in marine science, but I didn't know what specifically. And that experience kind of solidified actually going into coral.
Mm. Yeah, like for me, I started off wanting to be a veterinarian because when I was younger, I watched a lot of like veterinary shows and like like animal documentaries on like Animal Planet and just learning about them. So that's how
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like went into like the veterinary kind of like animal pathway. And then my school, like mine's a Chadwick's a K to 12 school. So like throughout the years, we've been having like kelp forest units or coral reef units or like a unit about Australia. And that's kind of like how I fell in love with the ocean more or less with
Yeah.
it. So it was like definitely something I wanted to do. And it got to like the point where like in like sixth grade, seventh grade-ish, like I realized that like I have to pick like what kind of veterinarian I wanted to do. I was like, I knew I didn't want to do dogs or cats because like although I love them and all, like I wanted to do something more exotic. So I was like, definitely definitely like all the experience at my school have definitely built up to like marine veterinarian. And like the climate change thing has been like a major thing throughout the years, especially in like since I'm like 18. It's like everything I hear on the news and like learning at school is just climate change this, climate change that, sea levels rising. There won't be any fish in 2050.
Say all the time.
Yeah, and I was just like something that's been in the back of my mind. So I like find it really interesting that like there's some people who don't even like recognize that's actually happening and stuff like that. And I just
Yeah,
find it
that's
really
so
interesting.
crazy. It is. Yeah, that's really, really cool. So like you have solidified that you want to go into marine veterinary science. Do you know if you want to do like marine mammals? Or do you want to do like
I think
invertebrates?
I think marine mammals, but like I wouldn't mind like expanding my horizons a bit to like
Yeah.
other marine paths just in case. But like
Mhm.
definitely marine mammals, I think.
Yeah, that's like such a cool area. Like I am always fascinated by marine mammals. It's obviously not the career that I pursue, but every single time that I see one or a video of one, I just can't get over how borderline human the connection that they have
Yeah.
with not only people but other animals as well is just like insane. And also just like the care techniques that have been created recently are so insanely cool. Like I didn't know that what is it? Dolphins, apparently they're like really prone to dehydration if they're in captivity. So they literally have to like stick a hose down their throat to give them water and they like enjoy it, I guess. I took a class in college on them and one of the professors was a marine mammal vet and she showed us videos of how she gave them water, and they were like so fresh to drink out of this hose. But it was so cute. They were like so genuinely excited, and they're clearly like thankful and had a big connection to
Yeah.
everyone who took care of them. And it's just like it looks so fun. Like it seemed really awesome. That would be a super cool career, and like maybe another life. I would also appreciate that.
And
That's
then
really
like what are some of the amazing things you've seen slash discovered when you're out on the field?
mm, I don't know. I've been really lucky to see a lot of really cool things, but um, honestly, just watching the science of coral care in the field evolving is probably one of the coolest things that I've been able to observe in my lifetime. Like I mentioned earlier, in high school, when I first saw these coral nurseries, to my knowledge, at the time, the Coral Restoration Foundation and its founder, Ken Niedermeyer, was one of the first people to do this. And one of his goals was to make this type of science accessible to everybody. So he was basically trying to end gatekeeping, as he described it, so that it would become common practice, because he knew it was working, and he knew that if a lot of people became interested in this and took the time to create these coral nurseries, we could expand the amount of coral tissue that we have to outplant and restore the reefs. And now coral nurseries with the big PVC pipe trees that float in the open ocean are super common practice now. And it is insane, like how many nurseries my organization has, and then so many other organizations, especially throughout the Caribbean. Um, it's really cool to be able to observe that growth in itself, and then also the different styles of nurseries and things like that that evolve, because there's branching species of corals and bouldering species of corals, and how you deploy those into a nursery and or harvest or outplant them are all completely different. And it took a lot of people and a lot of time to figure out how to optimize this process. And it is just like, I don't know, it's really interesting to be able to observe that and then work in that type of field every day. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the coolest thing. And then also, like, one time I went scuba diving in high school, and a big Goliath grouper came up to me, and I thought he was
Oh.
going to stop swimming, and he didn't. And he started nudging me into a rock. But we were in a, like, he's curious. He wasn't being aggressive. He was just trying to, like, I don't know if he wanted like attention, or he just wanted to be like the equivalent of like petting me or something. I don't know. But it was a very non-aggressive interaction. And we were in a marine protected area, though, so you're not supposed to touch any of the wildlife. So I
Yeah.
just looked at the guy, and I just put my hands up like, I'm not the one making contact. Please don't find me for interacting with the wildlife. So that was just like one of the funnier things that's happened.
Yeah, like when I watch like videos of like wildlife photographers taking pictures of like animals, I'm just like, how? Like, I know you're like not allowed to touch it because you're not supposed to like interact with them in any way. And I'm just like, how do you resist the urge to just like give them a pet?
I know, they look so open and friendly, and they're adorable. Like, how can you not? Especially fish. Like, I don't think fish get enough credit for being friendly. And a lot of them are just as curious as like puppies, and they want to come up and see you. But some of them are very aggressive, like damselfish. They're super tiny but mighty, and they will come up and nip your fingers, especially when I'm like cleaning outplanted corals. They'll come up because they claim a coral is like their home. And then they get
Oh.
really mad, and they try to like bite through my gloves, but they're super tiny, so they can't do any damage. And I'm like, wow, I wish I had that much confidence. Like, they're great.
And like, um, as we're currently living through a climate crisis, what are some of the major effects of climate change on your specific area of work?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of impacts that climate change has on coral reproduction. So, one of the main ones is asynchronous spawning. And essentially, what that means is most coral species will take certain temperature, solar, and lunar cues in order to basically time when they should release this genetic material so that they can reproduce. Because of rising ocean temperatures, an increase in storm intensities over recent years, specifically in hurricane season, which heavily impacts the Caribbean, which is where I work. A lot of those cues can come either earlier or later within the reproductive season. So it can be really, really hard, or it's harder, I should say, for corals to spawn at the same time and ensure that that genetic material is actually interacting in the water. Because in reality, in most species, when they release either gamete bundles for hermaphroditic coral or either egg and sperm for goniochoric coral, which means that they're either male or female, if they have about like a half an hour to an hour window after spawning until they can interact. And if you get the wrong cue at the wrong time, then it's like one
Oh,
coral can go and then another can go another day, or maybe even months apart. They'll never interact. And that's one of the main bottlenecks that we're observing. And that's all due to ocean acidification and rising temperatures in our seas. So that is the first thing that comes to mind is they can't even interact in the wild.
I
So
never knew that. Like, I only knew like the major effects on coral reefs or like ocean acidification, which
mhm.
is like the major thing we learned at school. And like I studied a bit more in like eighth grade as my presentation. So I
Mhm.
never knew that like coral had like this like spawning time to like
Yeah,
develop
it's
the, like
actually like it is insanely like it is to the minute how well they're timed. Like even when they're in separate tanks, because we bring in sexually mature coral, and in most coral species, sexual maturity is highly density dependent. So there are these really really big colonies that we bring in from a nursery,
mm-hmm.
and we put them in separate tanks, and we will leave them outside, and we'll ask all the people around our facility to turn off their lights so that they don't interfere with the lunar and the solar cues as well. And they get water pumped in their tanks naturally from the ocean, so they're getting all the same cues. And even when they are in separate tanks in different parts of our facilities, they will all go pretty much at the same time, which is so crazy. Like they all just like it's a perfect like perfectly choreographed dance essentially.
That's
Um,
crazy.
yeah, nature's wild. I don't know how they're able to do that. I can't even get my timing right on anything. So corals could do it much better than I can.
Like, what does new technology in marine biology look like, and how is it changing the field?
Ooh, there's a lot of really awesome new technology, and actually, the majority of it comes from hobbyist aquarists too. So, one of the cool things about marine science is because there are so many people who are either citizen scientists or not even involved in the research field at all, who just love having fish and coral as pets. And because a lot of these people, they'll have these animals in like landlocked states. Like I used to work at an aquarium store back in my hometown of Ohio. There's no ocean there. So how do you take care of an ocean animal that far away from its natural habitat? Well, these people have developed amazing, amazing tools to facilitate the care of these animals. And one of the things that we use is something called an ex situ spawning system. It was created by the Coral Spawning Lab in the UK with Dr. Jamie Craggs, and he basically created this system. It's just like essentially a big tank with a lot of machinery in the back that can perfectly simulate these same solar and lunar and temperature cues that I was talking about earlier that trigger coral to spawn.
Mm-hmm.
So what we currently do is we will bring in some wild colonies, we'll put them in the system and maintain their natural cues so that we can observe spawning and do the process of assisted sexual reproduction within our laboratory. But then one of our ultimate goals is to eventually use that same system, which is just a giant tool. It's a new tool. We've only been using it for like a year, to hopefully keep corals or like resident colonies in there long enough so that we can give them the cues somewhat out of their normal spawning window, meaning that we could get them to ideally spawn sometime in like April or May, a little bit out of their spawning season, so that we as people don't have to essentially work through the night for like months in a row. And so that we can also be able to focus on whatever species is in that tank. Instead of having to balance multiple species at the same time, it can be somewhat overwhelming and very tiring. So using that tool to make it easier on us as humans in order to help continue restoration efforts just by using a tank that was created by aquarists and researchers. And it can also, it doses nutrients that are naturally occur in the water column. It can alter pH, salinity. It even has these really cool pumps on the inside of it that can perfectly recreate natural tidal patterns that we have observed on the reefs. We like programmed the sunset and the moonrise and everything into it. So it's this really, really awesome piece of technology that has helped our program a lot.
That's amazing. Like I never like assumed that like aquariumists like were able to create this, but like they're definitely like I remember watching this video of this guy who had like owned like the biggest like in-house aquarium or something. And the
Yeah.
amount of like technology he puts into it just to take care of his fish and coral in the middle of his living room is like crazy.
Yeah. And a lot of it is just like, honestly, the majority of things that are in the aquarium industry were probably just created in some dude's basement and then they turned into a business. Like it is actually hilarious how much of my knowledge on husbandry has just come from people being like, oh yeah, I just added this to my tank and it worked. And I tried it. I'm like, oh wow, that did work. Awesome. And now it's a part of our normal protocol.
That's
Everything.
crazy.
Yeah.
And then like what are some common misconceptions about marine biology and being a marine biologist?
Um, I think one that I definitely have personally is when I was first starting out in college, I volunteered in a lot of research labs at my university. And I thought that, everyone, I assisted like a lot of graduate students and people like postdoctoral researchers and things like that. And I thought that everybody was super like regal and very like, oh, like I have my PhD, like I'm so much better than everyone, like blah 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 blah. It's like, oh, I have to be so formal around these people. They're so much better than me. And they are fantastic and extremely talented and so intelligent, but everyone is just so normal. I don't know how to describe it, but I expected there to be something different about a lot of marine biologists. And it's just these normal people who are so down to earth and so nice. And they just want to help the oceans and solve a lot of the problems that we are witnessing as far as our coral crisis goes, as far as an ecosystem collapse goes. And it's just like a bunch of people that have come together who are super down to earth and really, really nice. And they don't have an ego about them at all. And it's just like normal people. So I feel like a lot of people, when they come through tours of our facility and stuff like that, they will often say like, I didn't expect you guys to speak so normally and be so normal. It's like, and like, that sounds kind of weird, but it's true. I think that there's this weird air about research where it's almost like it's seen like a separate community, but it is a lot like other jobs in general, but at the same, because it's so unpredictable, it's a special career. Everyone's just really, really nice and down to earth, and it's a great community to be a part of. Yeah, I'd say that was like my biggest misconception personally. And then yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I feel like a lot of marine biology is well, also, okay, one other thing that I could think of is marine biology is incredibly diverse. Often when people say that they are studying a certain field, like for example, when I say, oh yeah, I study coral, usually people just picture like, okay, you're either like scuba diving and out planning, or sometimes you're probably in a lab. But we have so many different areas that you can consider. So even in my field of reproduction, there's a lot of intersectionality in, for example, microbiome studies, in genetics, in there's a lot of ocean chemistry, ocean acidification work being done on how it impacts corals at various life stages. That's a great intersectionality between reproductive work and also just wholehearted chemistry. I don't think that a lot of people recognize how diverse and how intersectional this field can be. And just because someone says that they want to work with coral or marine mammals or jellyfish or something like that, there are a lot of ways you can go about research and a lot of areas to research. So, yeah.
Yeah, like definitely talking with a lot of people for like the podcast is just like learning about like how broad and big the term marine biology is, which I find really fascinating because I never they like explain their jobs, but I never like really thought of as like marine biology. But like it definitely is because like I like how marine biology is kind of like interconnected in like so many ways. Like you can be like making documentaries, or you can be like helping people with real estate or stuff like that, just based off the ecosystem. And I just like never thought about that as like a term for marine biology, but like it totally makes sense.
Yeah. And like one area that I never really considered to be, I don't say like a part of marine biology, but I never considered it for my own career choices is marine policy as well.
Yeah.
Is a really, really interesting area because a lot of the, you know, protective rules and laws that are put in place are put in place through a legal way. Like so these marine policymakers essentially are the bridge between researchers and our government, and they try to make the most informed decisions based on most current research that we can protect these areas. And without people like that, we would honestly be in a much worse situation as far as our coral reef health go, but just ecosystems in general. And I think that is a really, really, really cool and important area that I encourage people to look into because I don't think a lot of people consider it as a career option. And it also pays really, really well. So I don't think people consider that often and definitely should. But that's just like another example of how intersectional and wide the umbrella of marine biology is.
Yeah. And then like for the last question is like, what are some of your favorite marine animals?
Ooh, oh, I could talk about this for hours. I really love nudibranchs. Like, I don't know. Have you ever like seen a nudibranch
No,
before?
I don't think so.
It is essentially a really pretty flatworm. It some of them are predatory and some of them are herbivorous. But I remember I had a pet lettuce nudibranch, and they're really, really cool because they just strictly eat forms of algae or seaweed. And they actually, when they digest part of whatever they're eating, it will extract the chlorophyll from the plants essentially, and it will infuse into its tissue, and it's actually able to photosynthesize with the chlorophyll that is consumed from algae, which is super cool. And they're gorgeous. They have these beautiful lacy frills in the back. This is beautiful bright green, but there's so many different species and they all look completely different, but that's the one that I'm most familiar with. Obviously coral, I love very much. My favorite species is Montastria cavernosa, which is great star coral, and it is one of the species that we work with on a regular basis, and it has these enormous, very expressive polyps, and you can see their mouths super, super clearly. So when they eat and we feed them, you can definitely tell which foods they prefer because they express as much as a coral can. And what I mean by that is sometimes we'll give them food that I know that they don't necessarily prefer, and they'll eat it, and their like polyps will go into their mouth, and they'll digest it essentially, and then they'll open back up for more. But they really love fish eggs and like really meaty forms of protein, and you can tell that they love them because it's like a really quick, like they'll shovel it in their mouth and immediately reopen for more. Or if you drop some like onto its neighbors, all the other ones start like expanding out looking for food, like literally asking for it. So I think it's like one of the few species of corals that actually is expressive in a way. It's charismatic.
That's crazy.
Oh, what was that?
Oh no, I just like never thought coral as being like expressive. Like I just like know they exist as a plant. Like you don't really see plants as being like expressive on land.
Yeah, they are in their own way. Like they'll tell you if they're upset. Some of them are very, very dramatic. Like Acropora cervicornis is really, it's one of our most abundant corals that we have that we work with. But when they are like, they get too much sunlight, they'll fluoresce green. And I just imagine them being like, oh, like it's too much. Like they need like on top of them, and they'll just tell you, because essentially they're making their own sunscreen is what they're trying to do, because fluorescence is a way to reflect light back out. But they'll tell you for sure if they're upset and if they're really, really happy, because they get super, super fluffy. Their tentacles will all reach out and they'll get super dark, and it's not expressive in like the way a person or a dolphin or a cat or anything is, but they are definitely really fun to watch for sure. But those are some of my favorite animals for sure.
For me, I'm like really biased because my school's mascot is a dolphin, so dolphins are my favorite marine animal.
They're great.
And I just love how like intelligent they are, because like a couple years back I watched a video of like dolphins like having a mirror in front of them, and they're like able to recognize themselves in the mirror, which I find really fascinating because all
faces like back at themselves.
Yeah, they're trying to see like the inside of their mouths or like their belly. And it's like, the fact that he can recognize himself, which like most animals can't, like they either think it's another animal or just like ignore completely, which I find like really interesting. Like they're just that smart.
Yeah, they're so funny. And I just love how playful they are. Like you just give them a ball or a leaf or something and they'll just play around with it like a baby almost. Like it's so cute. And we have some resident dolphins that live in the canal of the facility I work
Ooh.
at, and there were actually like two babies playing in like the grassy knoll, and we could see it from our desks. And they were so funny. They were like wrestling each other like two little toddlers. Like they're squealing, and like it was just so cute. And of course, all these boats came around and stopped and just started watching them, and they're so entertaining and adorable.
Yeah, they're super entertaining. And like the funny part is like sometimes like even though when they're really playful, they can also be like really vicious when they want to be, which I find hilarious.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's one of like the few animals that I really don't want to see when I'm diving. Like I love observing them from a distance, but I've been a couple times we've been on boats and I can hear them squealing in the distance. I'm like, oh no, I hope they don't come too close because they're known to like, not I don't want to say like hurt people, but they'll grab people's tools and things like that out
Yeah.
of curiosity, and I'm holding an expensive drill and I'm like, please don't take it. I don't want to pay for another one. They're super fun, like, and they look you right in the eye too, which you
You're
can't
like,
say
yes,
for a lot of
I know what
animals,
I'm
especially
doing.
coral. So.
Okay, so thank you so much for joining
And read
me.
facial expressions too.
Okay, so
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This has been awesome.
I have this dangerous feeling